So thank you everyone for coming to this short webinar on how to survive an FDA inspection. So your hosts today are Andy Kerridge, who is my colleague. He'll introduce himself shortly, and myself, James Flynn. I'm the CTO and founder of Priority. We're based in the US and in the UK, and we're specialists in food safety and food safety plans, and also in the management of FSVP programs, etc. We are a food safety consultancy company who happen to write very good software. We have evolved from a food safety solution called HACCP Now, and 25 years of food safety consultancy and software experience for me, and 30 years for Andy, who is also on the call. We have over 100 customers in the UK and USA and elsewhere, and we're part of the UK's Entrepreneurial Spark High Growth Accelerator Programme, and we are part owned by American investors as well. So just to let you know what our core focus is as a business, we focus on supply chain food safety, which is a big part of what we're here to talk about today. So I've introduced myself already. There's a lovely picture of me, and there's an even better picture of Andy, our head of consulting. Both Andy and myself are PCQI qualified individuals, having completed the FSPCA course, and we are highly experienced in food safety systems, food safety auditing, etc. Andy's going to give you a bit of advice on how to survive an FDA audit. He's got many years' experience of actually being an auditor and also being on the other side of the fence with the likes of Burger King, etc. But he'll introduce himself shortly. So moving on to a little bit about some of our customers. Our customers are very varied. We have very large bakeries on board. We have importers based in the US like Coast to Coast Produce, Conchita based down in Miami in Florida. This company here is the largest meat processor in Malta. Weetabix is the UK's largest cereal manufacturer, and Zeeland's Rom is a large fish processing company in the Netherlands. So we've got a very wide range of experience, wide range of customers, and that's given us huge amounts of experience going into consultancy and food safety, etc. So I'm going to just now hand over to Andy, but before I do that, we're going to do a session on the surviving of an FDA inspection, which Andy is going to host after he introduces himself. And then at the end of that, I'm going to give you a quick look at our 3i Verify solution, no more than 5 minutes, just to give you some sense of what's possible in terms of how to manage it with this problem with a system, etc. So I'd like to introduce Andy to you, and I'll hand over to Andy, and he will give you a bit of an introduction to himself and then proceed with the presentation. Over to you, Andy.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. Yeah, I'm Andy Kerridge. You saw my photo. You got a little bit of a background on the slide previously. Yeah, 25, 30 years. I mean, where do you start? I grew up on a farm, so that was food and food safety right from farm through to fork. But yeah, my experience being varied over the years. I started off in meat processing, supplying major UK supermarkets, and then moved into food service, restaurants and hotels, then via Burger King, doing lots of work overseas in interesting places like Russia and China and South Africa, Morocco, Egypt, over the time there, and ending up as head of food safety and quality. Time came to leave Burger King, and I became a consultant, and since then I've had a varied range of customers, blue chip companies and so forth, mostly concentrating on food safety and quality, which is not surprising as my background. But I've also been involved heavily over the last 10, 15 years with the BRC, and I've been involved with the setting of the BRC Global Food Standard. I think my name is on the last 4 editions of it, which is probably enough. So what I want to talk about today is the surviving inspection, which will happen to most people on this call. May not happen today, may not happen tomorrow, but it will happen. So we're going to set the scene, what to expect, look through some common inspection problems, how to prepare for them, what to do on the day, and then we'll finish off, as Jim said, with some of the system-based approach to dealing with some of these. So, FDA inspections may be unannounced. They are legally mandated, so you don't really have an option of saying no when the inspector turns up. Consequence can vary from everything's great through various gradations of warning letters, product recall and prosecution. The worst case, business failure and closure. The inspections will undoubtedly involve swabs. In fact, the term swabathon has been coined for what the FDA inspectors go through when they're on your site. And they may take a number of other samples whilst they're on site. And they will certainly do very rigorous documentation and record-keeping checks. However, if you've got prepared for this, then you will have little to fear. But for those who have not done anything, then I think the inspectors will definitely be going for the throat. So what to expect? Well, the first thing really that they're going to be looking at is, have you got a food safety plan? Who has written it? Is it done with rigor? How has it been written? Have the people who've written it got the expertise to put that food safety plan together? Has it covered all the points that they consider from a HACCP point of view? And has it brought in, beyond the HACCP, the preventive controls that are required as part of the FSMA requirements? And are the parts of the food safety plan verified and validated? They will then look at what have you got to support what you say you're going to do in that food safety plan. So what records? It doesn't really matter if they're paper or electronic, right? Depending on the size and complexity of your business. An electronic solution may be a step too far. But for a medium-sized business, an electronic solution for records is going to just speed things up and make sure you've got your finger on the pulse. Have you got records? How are you monitoring your complaints? Have you got a recall procedure and recall plan in place? Are the preventive controls being identified and applied? How are you managing your suppliers? Are you auditing them? Are you sending them questionnaires? Do you have a process? What are you doing in terms of the incoming ingredients or raw materials that are supplying? And as I said earlier, the sampling that the inspector will do, these 100, 150 swabs that they may be taking, which could cover obvious areas of production, but may also go into areas of non-production, so staff rooms and whatever. And the interesting and challenging thing there is, if they have sampled product, it may take 2 or 3 days for those results to come back. You may consider putting those products on hold, because if they come back with results that are not acceptable, you immediately get a recall. Do you have the management competence to be able to put this competence and support and commitment for the food safety plan? Have the risks been evaluated properly? The inspector is looking at how those risks are then managed. And of course, if they're looking around at physical environmental hazards, the standard of the building, the standard of the floors, the walls and ceilings, etc. So basically, you've got the intention there is to establish the overall effectiveness of your food safety plan and that of your suppliers. So you have to go back. It isn't just what you're doing. Common inspection problems. Well, okay, you may have a paper system. The inspector may be asking for some records. You've got 24 hours in which to produce those records. The faster you produce those records, the better. The suspicion is if you aren't able to put your fingers on them quickly, then they're probably not active records. They're not records that are being generated in a normal production day, and so speed of access to those. Are you ready for an audit? Do you carry out regular internal audits? They don't need to be full site audits. You can break them down by area and just keep looking at your factory from another point of view. Are you auditing your suppliers? Are you reviewing your records and your systems on a regular basis, making sure that the records that are out there are up to date, but not only up to date, but consistent across the factory? Are your systems working and communicating well? Mention again management commitment. Do you have a good food safety track record? If you are taking samples and sending them off to the laboratory, just be careful, because the FDA could demand to take samples from those retained samples. So once you've got the results from the laboratory testing, get rid of the samples. You've got the results, you have to keep those, but you don't have to keep the samples from which those tests have been performed. Another inspection problem, and it doesn't matter whether you're a food factory or whether you're a financial audit or any time of interrogative activity, people can be too defensive. They can clam up or they can panic. And one of the worst responses is just to babble on and give too much information. But one of the key questions, as it says at the bottom, is find out why the inspector's on site, because he could be coming for a routine audit, but he could be coming because of an investigation into a food poisoning, in which case the audit will be taking a very different course. So before you even start looking at records, etc., is find out what on earth he's there for. How do you prepare for this experience? Well, of course, you need a PCQI, but PCQI, 3-day course, etc., isn't in itself enough, because it's got to have the experience on the product or products that you are handling. Now, that's fine if you're a manufacturer. It's highly likely if it's a member of your staff that they're going to have experience of the products that you're processing. But if you're an importer or broker handling a wide range of products, it's very unlikely that one person is going to have that full range of experience. So think about how you can handle that, whether it's through use of consultants and so forth. Do you have an integrated approach to food safety on site? Do you have the food safety culture in your organization? What have you got in terms of your suppliers program? The systems that you've got in place, are they actually used and used frequently and regularly? Are they part of the daily life of the factory? Going back to what I said earlier, do those small internal audits regularly. You have to keep records for at least 2 years. So make sure you've got those records available and that we've got rapid access to those records. What are you doing in terms of environmental controls? Are you doing your own swabs? Are you cleaning checks, whether it be ATP or other methods for cleaning checks? How do you stay up to date with your legislation and guidelines, particularly if you're importers, brokers, etc.? Knowing what the legislation is from different countries, permitted levels for pesticide residues and so forth, what's approved and what isn't for each of the countries. And of course, is your HACCP program FSMA compliant? Hoping for the best is not an option. The FDA inspector will give you some leeway if there is evidence that you are trying and have made progress. But if you've done nothing, as I said earlier, they will be taking a very hard line. So, the inspector turns up. What do you do? Well, the first thing is, obviously, don't panic. But you also need to let other people in the factory or on site know that the inspector is there. So you need a plan in place. The managing director or senior management may not be on site, so you need to know how to be able to get in contact with them. You have to treat the inspector normally. They shouldn't be getting any special treatment. They need to go through the normal procedures that you would apply to any visitor, whether that's signing in, whether that's protective clothing, etc. They need to be treated as any other visitor. You should, of course, cooperate fully. Be honest. It's okay to say, I don't know. Better to say that than to waffle on and eventually come up with something that is just going to raise the inspector's suspicion. You want to establish what the inspector's agenda is for the day. What are they expecting to inspect? You need to make arrangements for that, and he may also need to understand what the production schedules and what's going on in the factory. So if there is something that inspector particularly wants to see, you can make arrangements for that production or that operation to take place. You do need to get the management involved at the start and end, at the very least. This is about management commitment and the food safety culture. It's no good you as a site quality person or the qualified individual, etc., handling the inspector and then reporting back afterwards to a manager who is divorced from the whole thing. Make sure you get a closeout and review meeting at the end, and anything that you're not understanding from the inspector, ask for clarification. Bear in mind, the majority of the inspectors that are coming around now are relatively new. They've gone through a training course as well, so they are also learning. They have experts available that they can call if they are visiting a factory with a process or production that they're not familiar with. So don't necessarily accept everything they're saying. Be prepared to challenge. You should be the expert on the products that you have. Okay, I think this is over to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Andy. So a lot of really good common sense tips about handling not just an FDA audit, but any kind of audit or inspection with respect to food safety. The key thing is to be organised and to have a good system in place, which I'm sure many of you, the fact that you're on this webinar and you're interested in that, I'm sure many of you do have good systems in place. For this next section of the webinar, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how we approach things, so you can get a bit of an understanding about what we do and what our solution is. So the big problem that we focus on is the fact that in the food sector, there are many different departments within any food organisation, be it a food manufacturing company or a distributor or even an importer. And the problem with the different departments is they tend to all have their different systems. So the buying department have got their system, the quality department have got their system, and the technical department have got their system, and none of them really talk to each other. The result is information being passed between different departments across the organisation, and no one person knows the whole picture. So this is the real problem that we focus on, the fact that different management systems for different roles within the organisation actually increases risk, because you have a situation where the buyer is buying based on price and not based on the supplier approval processes, for example. So that's one of the key problems that the Food Safety Modernisation Act is trying to address by making sure that quality and food safety people have a major say in supplier verification and in supply chain program verification. And that can only really happen if you have an integrated approach to food safety. So the solution that we work towards is to try and connect everyone into one food safety operations system. And I'm going to give you a quick look at just very headline in terms of what 3i Verify is and does, etc. So I'm going to come off the PowerPoint slides here and get into a web browser and show you a little bit about 3i Verify. So 3i Verify is a cloud-based solution that allows you to manage suppliers and to manage the approval processes and also to manage the process of approving and gathering information on raw materials and everything that goes along with that. So our cloud is global, particularly in the States. We are West Coast, Central and East Coast, so your cloud application itself will always be local to you, and the database that runs behind it is always dedicated to each of our customers. So when we get in, we've got a very simple interface, a very easy way to manage these things. And the first thing that's going to be of interest is the dashboard. So the dashboard will give us a real-time view of what the compliance picture actually looks like. And that is with respect to supplier approvals, it's with respect to raw material approvals, and it's also monitoring things like certification compliance and documents. So these are documents that are uploaded by the supply chain as part of your compliance activities. So the really good thing about this is we can see in terms of raw material questionnaires in this case, see how many have been issued, how many have been completed, uncompleted, and how many are pending approval. And this principle runs through all of these dashboard widgets here. So for example, if I want to see all the uncompleted raw material questionnaires, then I can click on that and get a list of them all, and then I email all of them in one hit. So that gives me a really efficient way of pacing things up and making sure that the raw material questionnaires are being completed, and we're moving forward with that. The certification side of things, it's the same idea. So we're getting certification or certificates uploaded by the suppliers automatically, and we are assessing how valid they are, which ones have expired, and therefore the ability to drill down into those and take action on these things. So from an FDA audit perspective, this helps us really demonstrate that we're on top of things, because it's a very quick and easy way to make sure that we are getting the information from our supply chain as required. Moving on into the supplier side of things, we'll go and look at how we actually issue those questionnaires and a quick look at how that process works. So the supplier screen will be loaded up from the side here. And I'm just going to go and find a supplier that I work with quite a lot here. And in here you can see all the supplier details and a list of all of the food materials that that supplier provides. And we can add new mappings in here like so, and this will help us track the details of that manufacturer of that material, because they may be different from the actual supplier. So we get to map the supply chain for all of the products. Very briefly, the contact side of things helps us with providing details for login for the technical contact at the supplier, because that's the person who will receive the questionnaire requests, the assessment requests, and the requests for certification in the system. Issuing approvals is very straightforward. We design questionnaires in the system and can design as many of these as needed, and these are the assessments which will be sent. So we can automatically resend these on expiry after they've come back from the supplier and have been approved. So typically we'd want to have a supplier assessment that is valid for up to 3 years under FDA rules, unless something has changed in the meantime. That means that they're now at a higher risk, in which case it would need to be reviewed. So sending a questionnaire is very straightforward. We just hit the send questionnaire button, and the technical contact at the supplier would receive an email. They would then log in and go ahead and complete that questionnaire. So I'm just going to show you an example of that. So one moment, we'll just log into there. Okay, so here's an example of a questionnaire. This one has been approved, and therefore this one has not been approved. So I'll quickly go in and have a look at that one. And what we can see is the supplier can confirm all of their details, just hit the next button and step through each section of the questionnaire. This one is a very basic questionnaire, and everything that you see in here is designed within the system. So you can design specifically what you want in terms of the questions that you're asking, the information you want uploaded, etc. So there are some basic assessment questions here, and you can see some answers to those questions there. The supplier would save these and then move on to the next section of the questionnaire. In this case, it's simply a list of products that's being uploaded. But the key is that we can create any kind of questionnaire and have the supplier complete that, and then when they're finished, they can then sign that off, and then you can approve it. So that is a very simple process. You just hit submit approval and then go ahead and put in the password, and then that is then submitted back to you as the customer. So it's a very simple, very straightforward process, and it's a very highly customizable process. One of the key things is that after the supplier has submitted information, the information on their side is now locked until it's been approved by you. So that means that they can't change anything until you have unapproved the questionnaire, for example. So if I go back into the other side of the coin, which is your control panel part of the system. So here we can see questionnaires that have already been, are in various states of being either approved or unapproved. If you needed to unapprove something, you've got a number of ways of doing that, sending it back to the supplier, for example, or unapproving it for internal reapproval or reassessment. So here's an example of the document that's created by this process, and you can see it's a PDF document, and any supporting information that's uploaded as part of the assessment is then hot linked in the system. So you can literally click on that and get access to that actual document, whatever it might be. So that might be a certification, or it might be a HACCP plan, or food safety plan, or food safety policy, etc. The supplier also receives a document like this, but they don't have your assessment information in there. So they get a copy of all the information that they have entered into the system, and you get all the information they entered plus your assessment. And this document is ideal for sending to the FDA or providing to the FDA as part of your audit readiness, because it demonstrates with a clear audit trail what verification activities were carried out, what approval processes were carried out, and all of the underlying documentation to support that information is locked in a read-only basis. It can't be changed until the approval unapproved. So that was a supplier approval. If I can find one, I'll quickly show you a raw material approval. I might need to go a few pages down for that, so let's go here. This gives you an idea of the way that the questionnaires can be designed, because there's a lot more information in this. This is a raw material questionnaire, and we've got certification schemes in here, for example. We can capture any kind of information that's required. We can capture the entire recipe of the product, including the breakdown of that recipe. We've got additives, nutritional information, so allergens, etc., the risk of cross-contact, cross-contamination, and a whole host of other pieces of information that we can capture as part of this. So this document is an ideal way to have one single place of the truth, really bringing things together, and it can be shared with the FDA, it could be shared with your customers, and it can be shared internally within your organization with other people like the quality, new product development department, etc., so that everyone's on the same page with regard to the material specification. That gives you a little flavour of what 3i Verify does and how it supports the FDA audit or a BRC audit or an SQF audit or any kind of food safety audit that you might be subject to at any time. There's a lot more to the system than this, but I just wanted to give you a little flavour of how this fits in with our theme for this webinar of how to survive an FDA audit. So if you have any questions at this point, you can use the chat box at the top of the screen. So please feel free to ask any questions of Andy or of myself, and I'll pass back to Andy to see if he's got any questions he would like to ask.
Sure, Jim. Thanks for that. What about confidentiality of data? A lot of information is being submitted by the suppliers and so forth. How do we deal with confidentiality?
Okay, that's a very good question. Well, confidentiality is something that could be built into the actual questionnaire itself. So, for example, I'm going to quickly go into the questionnaire design section here, and I'm just going to show you how easy it is to build in those kind of things. So just bring up the admin section and go into one of the existing questionnaires. So if I pick the material specification, so that's quite an extensive one that we've been looking at. So what we could do in here is we could really add a confidentiality section, and I'll just give it a sequence number so that the system knows where it is in the list, and we'll just nip into that new section that we've created, and we can start designing the actual confidentiality section. And in here I can go ahead and copy and paste in like a confidentiality agreement, for example. I don't have one prepared because I wasn't expecting that question.
It shows how genuine we are.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So we can, I'm not obviously going to type out a confidentiality agreement, but I think you get the idea there. You can create that section in here, and you can format that, etc. And then you could have another row in here with some sign-off fields with checkboxes and all sorts of information, and hook that up to parts of the system. So whether that answers your question, Andy, we could definitely have an agreement on confidentiality between you and your supplier. Yeah.
The other aspect is just the security of the data that's been submitted, I suppose, and that you can put in maybe different levels of authority for people to view, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've got various different privileges in the system, from authors, approvers, administrators, etc. So they have different roles within there. So I can see there's a couple of other questions. Doreen is asking, will there be a recording of this presentation available? Yes, we will make a recording available and email that to everyone who's attended the webinar today. And Annette is asking, can this system be designed for importers? Absolutely. This system is very specifically designed for Foreign Supplier Verification Program and Supply Chain Program. And it also is ideal for companies who are operating to BRC or SQF standards or IFS or AIB standards, because all of those standards have a requirement to have supplier approval processes, to have raw material and food material approval processes, and of course all of the food safety monitoring that goes with that. So it's a highly flexible system that can be designed to your exact needs. It can even be in multiple languages, because the whole interface is really designed by you in terms of what you want here. So it's even possible to have Chinese and English side by side on the same screen. Okay. Any other questions from the audience or any other pre-prepared questions you want to surprise me with, Andy?
I'll just see if there's, I'll just give people a minute just to see if there's anything else out there. But all right, okay. About keeping data up to date. I mean, obviously there are certificates go out of date, and whether you're BRC or whatever, your suppliers have that. Keeping track of 100 or 500 suppliers and all their certification is, I know from experience at BK, is we had one person full-time chasing suppliers, etc. So how do you deal with that?
Okay, so there's a couple of ways of doing that. One big issue is certification monitoring. So we've got the assurance section. So this is designed to monitor assurance schemes, etc., that your suppliers are operating to. And so in this section for that supplier, we've got two tabs in here. One is for assurance approvals, and the other is a list of applicable assurance. So what this is a list of assurance schemes that we expect this supplier to operate to. That list of, you can check off the ones that you want in here and save it. And then in the actual list of assurance for that supplier, we can then see the list of assurance schemes. We can simply then select the relevant scheme and send a request to the supplier, and then the supplier would then get an email and a link. And the email and link that they get is always going to have the actual the username and password in it for them, so that they don't need to remember that the whole time. So I'm just going to log in as that supplier now, and if we go to the certificate section, what you'll see here is there is the certification request. They can simply go ahead and enter in information, upload a copy of the certificate, and the whole process takes just a few seconds. You can set the audit date and the expiry date, and then done. Okay, so that then gets uploaded into the system, and if we come back over to the customer view and just refresh this, you'll see what the process is there. So just go back in here again and select that, and over to assurance. And there is the certificate that's been added, but you can see it's not been checked. Okay, so we've got the date checked and the check by has not been updated yet. So we can just go ahead and do that and put the check date in, and you can download and check the document there and click update request. So that's one aspect of the documentation problem. The other one is that during the supplier approval and material approval questionnaires, documents are uploaded as part of that process. So as well as being hot linked from the document that's produced, the supplier approval document and the material approval document, these documents are also uploaded into here. So again, we can see a list of all the documents in the system, and the ones that don't have an expiry date, we're going to want to go and check those because we know that we haven't looked at those yet. So in that case, we can go and view that document. We'll just click on that and we get a view of the document. So there's a process flow. We can check that out, and then we can set the document type, set the expiry date on there to maybe 2018, something like that, June. Okay, and then we can tag that, so we can find the hazard plan. So we might see product name here. Okay, and then click update. So it's as simple as that. These documents and their expiries then feed into the dashboard, and therefore we can automatically send emails out looking for updates on these documents if they've expired. And again, we've got full audit trail side of things when it comes to an inspector or an auditor looking at the documentation we hold on our suppliers. Okay, that was a little bit of a longer answer, Andy. Any other questions?
I think we've given good demonstration of what can do on this one. So
okay. Okay. Well, I would like to invite you guys to make contact with either myself or Andy in the coming even today or tomorrow or whenever is convenient for you, and we'd be more than happy to give you guys a detailed run through and explain a little bit more about the kind of help that we can give on this whole area. So particularly with supply chain programs for manufacturers, for foreign supplier verification programs for importers, and also for brokers who also need to make sure that their customers are looked after from the FSVP point of view. So I'd like to thank you all for coming along to the webinar. We'll send you all a recording of the webinar and a copy of this presentation. Please do get in touch if you feel we can help in any way. Thank you very much.
Okay. Cheers. Cheers all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.